Welcome to the Angus Report. I'm Clint Mefford, and we're bringing you the latest cattle news and education. This week, we're discussing growth in the background sector. Regional Manager Jeff Mafi gives us a market update from his region. We hear about the importance of value-added programs, and we visit with Keith Evans, former head of public relations at the association. This is the Angus Report. Time has brought gradual evolution and structural change to the cattle industry. Don Close, Senior Animal Protein Analyst at Rabo AgriFinance, describes the development of grow yards into permanent year-round backgrounding operations.
The current report that we've just released is growth in the background. And what we've done is we have taken a look at the, while still somewhat subtle, but the change in how grow yards are being used in the industry. And we've taken a sector that really wasn't a lot more than residual housing for cattle when the market got out of balance. And we're now using those facilities on a full-time basis, and that increased occupancy clearly is improving the returns to the grow yard operators and making them a much more viable business on their own. But the service that they're providing to the commercial feed yards is it enables them to use the grow yards as a collection point. It allows the commercial feeders to buy cattle in a broader weight band than the typical 8 to 9 weight steer. They in turn can take those lightweight calves and high-risk cattle and be staffed at a rate to get those cattle straightened out, that they're fully ready to perform once they're entered in the feed yard.
He identifies some specific influences that have driven the more permanent emergence of grow yards.
I think one of the key drivers that has brought this change about is, one is just the size of commercial feed yards and the fact that more and more of those companies are multiple locations, and the real driver is the labor shortage of that skill set to take care of high-risk cattle, that it has caused the commercial feeders to look for a source otherwise. A secondary driver that I think has brought this about is the transition to formula marketing, and that the cattle feeders are having to commit cattle to a specific time slot for harvest. Using the grow yards better allows them they have a much more accurate read on what the daily gain is, what the cost of gain is, and subsequently can target the out date of the cattle from the grow yard, the out date from the feed yard. So it helps their timing and just flow of cattle in the modern marketing system.
Close also explains how this new development will drive competition and ultimately provide value in all sectors of the beef industry.
One of the things that I really found interesting in doing this report, a lot of the research that I do is really tailored to one specific sector of the industry. This report, I think, has ramifications throughout the industry. And when I look at, okay, what impact will this have on the cow-calf producer? It will allow him, because the grow yard's constantly in the market, it allows him a broader window to sell calves that he's not trying to market calves the same day as all his neighbors. It will obviously mean more competition in that calf market that could support better prices. And if you take it to an extreme, if we take cattle that would be on conventional stocker grazing programs, it enables them to free up grass that we could expand cow numbers that otherwise wouldn't be possible. In the grow yard space, it's going to be more competition, and I think it's going to drive more efficiency in that sector. So there will be changes there. For the feeders, I think it has cattle in better position to go on a seamless transition to go on feed from the grow yard to the feed yard that provides the incentives we've already talked about. And then just the fact that theoretically those cattle are on feed longer, I think it will provide additional benefits to the overall grading rate and help the industry produce a better product.
Stay tuned. We'll be back with more Angus Report after a break.
Welcome back to the Angus Report. Regional managers are the boots on the ground for the association. Clint caught up with Jeff Mafi for a market update from his Kansas, Oklahoma region.
Welcome to the Angus Report, Jeff.
Thank you, Clint.
So Jeff, give us a little bit of an evaluation from your perspective this spring on what the demand has been for Angus bulls, and maybe contrast it to last year around this time as well.
Demand for Angus bulls has been really good compared to 2018. In fact, we've sold since January approximately 350 more bulls at sales at public auction. The average selling price is slightly back. In fact, it's just $100 back compared to a year ago. But these sales are better attended, and the demand for bulls has been really strong.
Now, what about on the female side as well? I know in your region you're mainly focusing on bulls this spring, but what about Angus heifers?
You know, female demand, whether it be registered or commercial, has been back a little bit, to be honest with you. Given the moisture and the winter conditions that we've had and the lack of forage and feed, you have not seen an uptake in female demand, but we kind of expect female demand to pick up here in the middle to latter part of April and May, given grass is coming on really strong.
You mentioned the moisture. Of course, moisture has been extreme for many parts of the U.S. and continues to be so in the plains, the Midwest, the Southeast, and it's had a direct effect on the cow-calf sector. Tell us a little bit about Oklahoma and Kansas and how they've been dealing with the added moisture.
In most of the region, the added moisture has been really good. If you get in the northern part of the territory, in northern Kansas, it's been to the point it started to affect, just production agriculture, much like in Nebraska and South Dakota. But again, in the central plains and south, we've really needed the moisture and certainly appreciative that we've got it.
Jeff, what would you recommend to Angus breeders who are maybe looking into the possibility of leveraging Angus Link or Angus Source in their marketing for their commercial customers?
I think it's very important that those breeders educate themselves on those two programs and connect their customers as they see fit to whether it's the Source and Age program or use an Angus Link to better identify those genetics, those superior genetics in their herd.
Jeff, you mentioned genetics. Let's kind of segue into the dollar value index discussion. Of course, the association and AGI recently announced updates to those. What kind of questions do you get from Angus breeders in your region?
Those questions are very specific relative to what the new index, such as dollar maternal, will look like, what traits are figured in that index, and then how what differences compared to the old dollar B will the new dollar B look.
Sure. Now, of course, they can go to angus.org/index to learn more. You talk about education, and one of your many roles is educating Angus breeders and commercial producers. This is your really heavy time of year, and you do a lot of sales support. But what else do you do throughout the week to support your region?
In addition to being at these sales and representing the cattle, we spend a lot of time talking about educating the commercial buyer about the genetics that are available to him, the different tools that he has, selection tools, and then about the association programs, in particular, our new programs, the changes in our Source and Age program, and the association's feeder calf program, Angus Link.
Right. Well, thanks, Jeff. It was a pleasure having you speak to us today, and good luck down the road, and we'll see you here at the office in a couple months.
Thank you.
We check in now on the latest cattle market news with the Cattle Facts Update.
Hello, and welcome to the Cattle Facts Update. I'm Troy Bockelman. With an increase of 2.5 billion pounds of beef, pork, and poultry produced in 2018, Moving this product to the global marketplace was important to alleviate the pressure on domestic prices. After a sluggish start to broiler exports, the second half of 2018 showed tremendous growth, and broiler exports finished the year up 4% to just over 7 billion pounds. South Korea was the main driver in the increase in beef and pork exports, with nearly 40% growth in both products to this Asian market. Beef exports finished the year just over 10% and was the third year of double-digit increases in a row. This fueled beef exports to a record high 3.16 billion pounds. Pork was caught in the trade war crosshairs, with increased tariffs to shipments on both Mexico and China. While there was a slight decline in shipments to Mexico, China saw growth even with an additional 50% in tariffs. Total pork export shipments finished the year up 4% to a new record high, 5.9 billion pounds. 2019 is shaping up to be an interesting year for exports. The U.S.-Mexico-Canada trade agreement has yet to be ratified. There are ongoing negotiations for a bilateral trade agreement with Japan, as the U.S. pulled out of the TPP agreement, as well as continued trade talks to resolve the trade war with China. Yet the biggest wild card out there today is African swine fever in China. China produces half of the world's pork, and current estimates are that between 20 and 30% of the hog herd in China has been liquidated, resulting in massive losses of pork production. In 2019, CattleFax expects that U.S. pork exports will exceed 10% growth for the first time since 2011. Yet all of the pork exported globally in 2019 would not fill the Chinese pork gap. So broiler exports, and to a lesser extent beef exports, will also be supported. It'll be important to continue to watch shipments to China for all three proteins, as the U.S. is a major player in feeding the world. Increased shipments may allow exports to exceed expectations, and strong exports will be a positive to the U.S. market as expansion continues in 2019. For the Angus Report and CattleFax, I'm Troy Bockelman.
To learn more about CattleFax, your leading source for beef industry market information, visit cattlefax.com.
Next on the Angus Report, we hear about program offerings through Angus Source. Stay with us.
Welcome back. Angus Source is a USDA process verified program with 6 individual programs to choose from. We sat down with Johnette Gottsweiler, Director of Commercial Programs at the American Angus Association, to discuss the importance of value-added programs and to announce a new program offering through Angus Source.
The American Angus Association has Angus Source, which is a USDA process verified program. And remember, you're not buying tags, you're enrolling in a value-added program. So you're going to receive an RFID, which is a program compliant tag for Angus Source. Angus Source has 6 PVPs, or 6 points to their PVP: age and source, non-hormone treated cattle program, Never Ever 3, which is no antibiotics, no growth promotants, and no animal byproducts, cattle care and handling, and calf management, as well as the Angus sire genetic component. We also include with each of those enrollments the marketing document that goes to more than 800 potential buyers. So this low-cost verification program is offered to anyone in the commercial cattle business today. So if you want to enroll in Angus Source, you do not have to have registered Angus cattle or registered Angus bulls on the operation. Now, if you do want to enroll in Angus Source with the Angus genetic component, you will. But Angus Source is just an age and source program today. So we could literally help any commercial producer, whether they're running Red Angus, Charolais, Hereford, Simmental, Sim Angus, become enrolled in our value-added program, which is a PVP through the USDA. It creates more opportunities for buyers to bid on your calves on sale day. Let's just think about going into a McDonald's or Burger King, and you have the option of adding pickles and onions and lettuce. So buyers are kind of that same way. When they're getting ready to buy those calves, it's kind of what are those extra added items that you can add on because they have other markets that they need to service. And so, you know, today, maybe they only just need to produce X number of pounds of ground beef, but maybe some of that ground beef needs to go to the EU, or maybe some of that ground beef needs to go to a certified Angus beef brand, or maybe some of that ground beef might need to go to a program that is an all-natural program. So if you have these extra verifications on your feeder calves on sale day, it gives that buyer more opportunity to funnel your calves into additional markets. But we're also trying to help you market your calves, get that information out to potential buyers so that you do have more bidders on the seat on sale day. So one of the things, as we have added the Angus sire genetic component to Angus Source, we have also incorporated a new enrollment fee with Angus Link. So those producers, those loyal Angus producers who have always utilized value-added programs or maybe want to try value-added programs, new pricing is available now. If you want to dual enroll your calves in Angus Source and Angus Link, you will have a match pair set tag. So you're going to have an RFID tag for Angus Source, a visual tag for Angus Link. So what you're getting in that package is age and source verification, the Angus sire genetic component verified by USDA, PVP, Angus Source, Angus Link enrollment, so you're going to be getting those 3 simple scores of beef, grid, and feedlot to get a baseline on your Angus genetics and to give those buyers a little bit of an idea of how those calves could potentially gain and grade on the rail. So this all-encompassing program for producers is very beneficial.
Up next, we visit with the former head of public relations at the association. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to the Angus Report. Keith Evans dedicated 35 years of his life to promoting Angus cattle. Under Evans' leadership of the Public Relations Department, the association won numerous advertising awards, including the award-winning elephant ads of the 1980s.
Well, I grew up in Clinton County, Missouri, near a little settlement at that time called Converse. And we've always been farmers in the family. Went to college and studied agricultural journalism. Then into the Army, where I edited the Post newspaper down at Fort Polk, Louisiana. And then got my real education, I think, at the Drover's Journal and the daily farm livestock newspaper published in the stockyards in Chicago. I was still at the Drovers and was looking about leaving. I was married and we had our first child. And so I had applied for a job with the Old Farm Quarterly, but I was going to meet the editor at the Ohio State Fair. And so I had done that day, and that evening several of us sitting around in a bar, and this lady comes in and she wants to read your palm for $1. So Herman Purdy, of all things, who's the old Penn State professor, said, yeah, he wanted that. So everybody had their palm read, and then they got one question. So when she came to me, I said, no, I don't. I'm not interested. Always making fun of that sort of thing. So anyway, Lloyd Miller says, here's $1, you read his palm. And at the end, I asked, she said, what's your question? And I said, well, should I stay where I am or should I get a new job? And she said, oh, just stay where you are. So the next day, Lloyd and the regional manager contacted me, and within a few months, I was in St. Joe, the Public Relations Department. We had the American Angus Association's public relations program, started by Lloyd Miller, was in operation and long before I got here. And other breed associations had adopted some of the same policies. The one thing that I think was really different when I was first starting, it became an important program. I would go do stories on Angus commercial people usually, and we'd give them to publications. In those days, there were a lot of livestock publications, and we got all this free promotion. But I mean, that was a thing that no one else ever did. Something else they never did was the clip art that people could use. Frank was good at that. That went out. And then just strictly the advertising program and the advertising budget. It was, even in the worst of times, it was better than any other breed association. The Continental breeds came in at the time when Hereford and Angus were small. I mean, you can look at some of the pictures of Grand Champion bulls and females, and they were about belt high, some to a tall man. So they could breed Charolais, particularly was the first. They'd make a good cross with Angus, and feedlot operators and packers both liked them because they would grow. They could get them bigger. And a lot of people switched from Angus cattle to one of the exotic breeds, as we used to call them. And that affected the association. It affected our marketing too, because we stuck strictly at that time with two things, that the quality of the Angus beef. And we had reporters at the various stockyards that were still in operation, and to report the kind of cattle that brought the top price on the stockyards every day. And of course, 80–90% of them were always Angus. So we kept hammering on the quality thing. Lloyd, he thought that it would be good to show how Angus cattle did, particularly in the West. In other words, when he started, Hereford cattle dominated the breed association numbers and dominated in the West. And so he'd show these good Angus cattle and how they were doing in different parts of the country, because they thought, well, in West they had to be Herefords and they had to be Brahman type in the South. And so he showed that Angus did well in most of these instances. And it was so popular that he kept on, and we kept on. That was one of the first things I did when I got here. Lloyd wanted a new movie on the junior program. I took a course in movie making from the old Calvin Studios in Kansas City, who did a lot of that at the time. What we did was buy a new 16mm movie camera, and I shot an awful lot of the footage for that movie, and did later. I mean, 2 or 3 movies. I was the cameraman for most of that. Then, Calvin Productions, they would edit it, put it together, get a narrator, and make sense out of what we'd shot. Well, we thought we were doing some good things. That I don't know whether we were looking that far into the future, but I mean, that was what we sat around and talked about, how to get more recognition, how to get more people to learn about Angus beef and Angus cattle. And there was this hunger out there, I guess, to teach people about beef quality.
Well, Keith had a huge impact here at the association, and it's an honor to continue on his legacy. And that's a wrap for this week's Angus Report. Tune in next week for more industry-leading news and education. And as usual, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Angus TV, for more highlights from the association. We'll see you next week.